Mr. Rizzi, how are you doing today?
I'm excellent. How about yourself?
Doing good. It's truly an honor to have you on the podcast. I started this just a couple months ago with really the intention to call on friends and see like their perspectives on life because I know that everyone kind of comes from different places in life and they grew up with different backgrounds and experiences, and everyone brings forth their own perspectives on what it takes to live a fulfilling existence. And I had a lot of conversations with friends and things like that, but now to have a Navy SEAL on the podcast right beside me, even after hearing all your stories at Petty, there's so much I want to talk about with you, and I'm really excited for this one today.
Sure.
So let's start at the beginning. So I know that everyone who joins the Navy SEALs that I've like read about or watched in the past, they all have like very, very different ways they've kind of found it, or different ways that it was introduced to them and before they went on to actually pursue it. So what did that kind of look like for you in the beginning? Like when did you first start thinking about joining the teams? And what did that preparation look like for you? Like I know that first you have to kind of mentally prepare yourself that this is something I want to do. And then what did it look like for you as you decided to get ready for the training and all that?
It's an excellent question, but it is actually a years long development that started at Petty. As I spoke to everyone while I was there for the Veterans Day speech, I was a JV swimmer at Petty. Mind you, it was a ridiculously strong team. Um, but I had to struggle to stay on the team and to, keep up with the standards that they had set there, which basically started me thinking that nothing in life is free. Anything that you want, you have to work for. And I think that's sort of what Petty instilled in me. And that is, as I told you, they told me I'd never go to the Naval Academy, I'd never graduate, I'd never become, captain or a SEAL. And at that point, it was, no, I'm going to, and I'm going to show you that I can. So it really starts at Petty. And my grandfather, who was, World War II Pearl Harbor survivor, that drove it. Now, as I got to the Naval Academy, more of the lessons from Petty continued, which is, look, nothing is easy. You're among the nation's best and brightest, and I was never supposed to get in, so I'm going to prove that I belong here. So it was fighting through that process, and when I graduated, I went to a ship. 1 year, 6 months, 10 days, 8 hours is how long I was on that ship. And I was one of 8 that was picked to do the lateral transfer to the SEAL community. But everything on there was, I loved the military. I truly, absolutely enjoyed my ship, but there was more to life for me. Um, More challenge, I think, more that I could give. And I had heard about the SEALs initially from a classmate at Petty named Brian Blue, who we were talking. He was telling me about some guys that were swimming in a deep lake right next to a dam. So that got me intrigued. And the more I went, the more their types of missions resonated with me. I've always been fairly physical, extremely active. I've always felt more comfortable on or in the water than out of it. So at that point, the switch goes on, and the switch is I will, not can I, should I, or might I. All doubt goes away because that is the objective. That's the end state. When you shoot a gun, you do front side focus and you look at the target. There's no where's the target. You know where it is. You know what the objective is. So you can get laser like in your focus. And for me, that voyage started at Petty.
Cool. And you mentioned that there were initial struggles in your path, right? That you weren't like the best in the swimming team, and then you had all these doubts from society telling you that this is never going to work out for you, that you will never succeed in this life path. And typically, this is where most people fall, right? They say that, oh, well, I guess it's not meant for me. I'll go the conventional path. I'll do what people are asking me to do. And I think it's a very unique skill to be able to say, no, well, they might be telling me this is the way to live, but I see this vision for myself. And it's very hard to, I'd imagine, to live a life through like your own individual instincts and telling yourself that this is what I want to do. So how did you kind of overcome those moments where, people are telling you that this will not work out for you, those moments of big loss?
Um, I'll be honest with you, a lot. There's two parts. Obviously, my parents were huge in supporting me and making sure I knew whatever I put my mind to, my body and my physicality would accomplish. But the faith put into me by the staff right there at Petty with you was also key. And after that, it was, you know what, they told me I couldn't make the Petty team. I did. It almost became a point of pride for me to do that to everybody that said no. And everyone that was competing with me, when they fell along the side, it only made me stronger. And let's face it, life's too short to follow it. There's living and there's being alive. I don't want to just be living. I want to be alive. I want, at the end of my days when I check in, I want St. Peter to be like, dang, Tristan, you worked it. Your body is at zero. There is nothing salvageable about it. You had an awesome life. And it's hard to tell at your age, but life goes so quickly, and it's quite frankly too short to have regret. So set your mind, and you will achieve what your heart desires. And I may have done it in the SEAL, but I know we have brain surgeons, we've got politicians, we've got all kinds of incredible people from when I was there.
So I really like
You know,
this. Yeah,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
all good. I like this distinction you bring up with living and being alive. It's very interesting. How would you describe it? Like, what does it feel like to be alive, like versus just living? And how would you say that you were able to escape just living and be alive? Like, what is it really? What constitutes the idea of like being alive?
Following your own path. It's all 9 to 5 is great. There's nothing wrong with it. Standard, a house, 2 cars. There's nothing wrong with that. I drive, a hybrid. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But the ability to think I want more, and not more in terms of I want more money, I want more physical beings, but more I want to have a blast while I'm doing things, and I want to take memories away that nobody else can say that they've done. I mean, how many people can say they jumped out of a plane at 4 a.m. in the dark, landed in the water, went on rebreathers, executed a mission, and then they were extracted at 10 a.m. I mean, you just can't make that kind of stuff up. And, while it's certainly absolutely taken its toll on me physically, I wouldn't trade that for the world, because the back of a plane opens at 20,000 feet at night and it's freezing cold, and you're looking into, a Marcel Marceau book that, the ultimate leap of faith is to jump. And I'm looking out the back end of a plane and they're like, go. And you're like, oh, heck yeah. You know what? I don't want to, but this is what life is about, and then later on that day when you're at the Waffle House having breakfast with the rest of the guys, it's like, that was awesome. I mean, where else are you going to replicate that? So, there are ways to accomplish that in politics, in building businesses, and, doing any number of things in sports. But for me, it was, I'd like to try something completely different. I mean, hence these boats behind me, how many people can say they've done it? Now, I had never intended to race this, but Billy was like, hey, it's time to get rid of my first race boat, small motors. Let's put some real ones and let's make this a life experience for you. And I'm like, you know what? He's right. He's absolutely right. That's what life is. It's living it. It's making memories where, at the end of the day, when you're sitting down with your family, they're like, oh yeah, I remember when we did this and we did this and we went on that trip. It fills life. It fills the bowl of life.
Yeah, 100%. I read a book recently called Mastery by Robert Greene, and what it does is it breaks down like a lot of the masters of history, like Albert Einstein, Michael Faraday, like all the people that have really like mastered some kind of craft or some kind of art. And the common pattern I saw in each of the stories that they bring up is that they all formulated their own life path, and it was all driven by some kind of instinct that separated them from the people around them. That, you know, everyone is following the cookie cutter definitions of success, where like you go to school, you go to university, you get a job, which can be really fulfilling, obviously, which if it's something you genuinely enjoy doing. But unfortunately, I feel like a lot of people today get stuck in zones where they're doing it just out of expectation when there's something inside of them that wants to do something else, but there's all these like limiting forces holding them back, right? And I see that in a lot of my friends as well, that they'll live their day doing the schoolwork that's necessary of them, doing the sports that's necessary of them, but not really driven by like a kind of internal like force or purpose that's telling them that this is like the thing that's bringing me that fulfillment. And I think I was like that for a long time too. But I think after reading this book and after like trying to start like new things, I found that I was able to access like some piece of that like internal force, like through wrestling at Petty and through working on these kind of projects, right? Because like
Yeah.
the fact that like, okay, I kind of wanted to start this project, but then there's obviously these forces that I waited for like 3 months before I did because I'm like, wait, but this reason and that reason and that reason. But then one day something inside you just says, let's just do it, right? And then you just do it, and then you realize like, wow, like this sense of fulfillment you get from working on something like this can make life like that much more enriching, right? When would you say you really like found that in your own life? Like was it sometime at Petty where you started to feel like this idea of being alive, or did it really take you all the way till
No,
you're at the SEALs? Or
so that's truly a fantastic point, and I don't want anyone to take away that I left Petty with laser focus. I left Petty with the core pieces I needed to get that laser focus, but it took me a little longer to mature mentally. So what a lot of people were doing, at 16, 17 at Petty swimming, where hey, you have to suffer to win. I wasn't there yet. It took me a little longer to get there, but when I got there, it was stronger. And as I looked and I saw, it became more of a, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. What have you got to lose? And that sort of, that rolls into the three types of SEAL leaders that I've seen. You have the ones that just want to be comfortable. They don't really want to do anything. This is the status quo. I'm happy with it, and there's nothing wrong with that. And this is, let's call it, the three people of life. You have the people that are following a path, and it's a path to success. um they stay on it, don't deviate too much, and the formula of success will ensure that they have a complete and wholesome life. And then you've got those that are willing to take risks, the Elon Musks, the Steve Jobs, which is like, well, everyone's going down this way, but I want to go that way because no one's ever done it. And you know what? If I make a mistake, it's okay. I can just change the direction I'm going. And I think what ends up being is people become afraid to make mistakes, but we learn more through our mistakes and we end up stronger. You learn more by losing. I learned more not making the varsity team at Petty than I ever would have had I made it. It forced me to get stronger up here. And like I said, I don't know how many of my Petty counterparts have been ever helocast out of a helicopter 12 miles off the coast of San Diego at night, and they're like, see you when you get back. It puts me in rarefied company. I mean, not that I'm any better than anyone else, but no one else can say that. And that's what's fun about it, is taking that step and jumping out of the helicopter, with your arms crossed 20 feet, and you circle up with the guys. You're like, all right, I can see the lights on the shore. Everyone got fins. Let's go. And you just do it. There is no question about, am I going to make it? Am I going to drown? It's no, the next thing that's going to happen to me is I'm going to be at that Waffle House having breakfast, and we're going to talk about how freaking awesome it was. And thus is Petty. It's like, don't be afraid to make a mistake and just go with it. So that's probably the key piece in there is, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, and two, it's okay to make mistakes. That's how everyone gets better.
yeah, I heard this quote recently that the expert of a field has made the most mistakes in the field.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
I think
amazing,
that
yeah.
it's that, Malcolm Gladwell, where it takes 10,000 hours of experience to become a true expert. I don't know if it's 10,000 hours, but the point is, if you live it, you breathe it, and you execute it, you will become it. You will become that expert, whether that's computer programming, whether it's doing podcasts, whether it's social media, whatever it happens to be. If you focus on living every day, not going through the motions, but how can I make it better? How can I make it different? How can I continually process, improve? Heck yes.
Yeah, 100%. Hearing your stories about jumping out of an airplane with your friends and then going to the Waffle House after, it reminded me like something that I've always heard when I've watched like other podcasts from Navy SEALs and I've read books by Navy SEALs, that the sense of brotherhood and the sense of like community in the Navy SEALs is one that's so unique that they say that it's like unlike anything else. So how would you describe like your sense of brotherhood or like friendships that you found through the communities?
So it all starts at BUDS, which is Basic Underwater Demolition School, which is in San Diego. And everybody comes to BUDS and you train to become a SEAL. My class essentially started with 188. Well, with the people that rolled in, probably about 205. We graduated 18 original, 18. Um, but you have lived through the most miserable of experiences, the hardest of suffering after you've done a long swim and they're like you're going on a 12-mile run. You've been cold, but you experience it together. They are cutting away the people that think differently, like I can't, I won't, I don't want to. And you're left with a very, very specific breed of person. Then you go to the actual SEAL community, you get your SEAL training, and you build upon that, where I have a guy walking right behind me and right in front of me with a gun, that far from my head. And their job is to cover their field, and my job is to cover mine. And we're there to execute a mission. It's the most complete sense of team, where if we fail, we don't come back, or we don't do our nation's objectives. Terrorism runs rampant, so it becomes tighter and tighter and tighter. And because of the common bond of going through BUDS, going through the training, going through the selection and validation, you come to trust those people. And when I tell you, if one of my brothers, and I have like 10 SEAL captains that all retired around here, if any one of us asks for anything, the other one is there. It's not about money. It's not about IOUs. It's about, hey, this is a brother. We need to take care of him.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that it's also there's that sense of like you all have like the similar kind of mindsets, right? The fact that you all survived that training together, which really pulls you together. And I think that also from like what I've previously understood, that anytime you have a group of people working toward like a same kind of core mission, they're always going to be driven by that will kind of unite them together as a force. Um, when you, I know that another thing that I've seen that with a lot of Navy SEALs is that the working on the teams, it gives you a sense of like mission or purpose, like to spend your hours and day toward that purpose and mission, which is why like a lot of teams, like well, a lot of people from the teams when they like exit the Navy SEALs, a lot of them like struggle to have a sense of life fulfillment or like something to work towards after they've come out of the teams. So how would you say that after the years you've come out, you've kind of like I see that you're working a lot with these boats and maybe that's like been associated with it, or how have you found a sense of
Yeah,
fulfillment or life purpose after coming out?
that is a truly fantastic point. And uh, for me, it applies to, remember I told you, are you living or are you alive? The Navy SEALs is a part of who I am or who I was. It is not me. I am there to contribute. I'm there to grow. I'm there to execute. I'm a part of the SEAL community, you know, but that is part of the stuff that helps define who I am. It is not who I am, because ultimately we have to have that in here that allows us to move through life. Before I joined the SEALs, I was a student. Before that, I was a child. After the SEALs, I still have to have definition. And when I told you being living or alive, I've been in a big organization where I'm a small cog in a huge wheel, and that was great. But now it's you know what, I'm willing to take the shot and step out of the standard bounds to see if I can continue. So for me, it was never really a question of, am I going to continue to live? Now, this right here does get some of the adrenaline out of me, and make no mistake about it, driving a boat seems really simple. It's probably one of the most complex things I've seen mechanical with human machine integration. It actually takes two people to run this boat at its optimum. But you take that same drive that took you to be a SEAL, that doesn't end when you retire, you quit, you leave. It just serves as the foundation to take the next steps.
So basically a life where you're constantly taking risks and you're constantly saying like, what is it do I like something inside of me is guiding me to do? And not just
Yeah.
like conforming, but doing as much as possible to live.
And I will tell you straight off the bat, if a business venture fails, am I going to be pissed? Absolutely. But at least I had the guts to try,
Yeah.
and again, you it is more formative through strife and through struggle than if things are given to you easily. You appreciate everything you have more, and you work harder. And I firmly believe in it. Now, there's believing in what you do, which I absolutely do. And you can't say, I'm going to be a billionaire, but not have a vision to get there. They have to kind of, work in tandem. So I'm going to zag when everyone else zigs, but I'm going to have a plan. In the special warfare community, it's called plan your dive and dive your plan. Now, you're obviously on the dive going to have to react to things that come at you, but you have a vision and an end state to move forward.
Right. How would you say like you spend your time now? Like what are the kind of central like life missions or like things you're working on right now that you've left the teams?
So I'm the president of a company called Tocaro Blue. We are developing an artificial intelligence for vessel navigation. So again, for me, if you're noticing the common thread, it's always been the water. So working with boats, working with engineers, working with developers, working with software guys, working with executives that have experience to make things work is very similar to putting together a team in soft and leveraging each other's strengths. So, before it was the SEALs doing stuff. Now, I have this hobby here, running boats and learning about them and trying to get better. And then on the maritime side for work, it's, how do I develop a capability that stands out where everyone else is fairly mundane? And that's what Tocaro Blue is.
Yeah, I love like the symbol of the water you use to kind of describe that sense of like work task that you always kind of comes back in your life. Because when we look back at like previous like masters of history, like they also always had a central thing they always fell back upon, right? An example I always like to go back to is like the Wright brothers, right, who flew the first airplane. When they were very little children, their parents would give them like toys for Christmas, like these little like toy airplanes or cars. They would break the whole thing apart, take all the pieces apart, somehow put it back in together. There's like something like genetically wired inside of them that is telling them that this is what you have to go do, right? But look at Leonardo da Vinci. When he was growing up, paper was like rare commodity, like papers, arts, crafts. You didn't really have readily access to that where you were growing up. But what he would do is he would sneak into his dad's office, steal sheets of paper, go in the woods and just start drawing because something inside of him is like just guiding him to be like, this is where I have to be. And it seems to me that, with swimming at Petty and then going to Navy SEALs, and now that there's a sense of fulfillment that maybe water brings to you, or the sense of like working with things in the ocean.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to understand who you are. If I go on the water with a buddy or by myself on a boat for 4 hours, when I'm on the water and I'm watching the waves, regardless of how good or bad the weather is, you become one with the environment. I'm not worried about my cell phone. I'm not worried about my email. I'm not worried about, did I fill my truck up with gas? It's about you and nature, and that's mine. And when I come off the water, it feels like I took a month-long vacation.
Have you heard of the concept of flow state activities?
Called what? Say again.
Flow state.
No.
So I read about this concept recently about flow, right? Where it's essentially you're so immersed in some task or some activity that you have no thoughts in your mind, right? That, for example, I might be working on the podcast and I'd be maybe editing videos or talking to people. And when I'm so immersed in that activity, everything kind of like goes gray in the background, blurs in the background. Like I'm not checking my phone, I'm not checking my email, I'm not worried about my math test next period. I'm in the zone. And in the same way, I think everyone has like a unique flow state activity that when they work on it, it's like nothing else matters, right? And to me, it seems that the way you're describing it, it's like your own flow state activity that when you're there, there's like nothing else matters but the thing. And to me, one of the reasons I also started this podcast is because like I want to see like what brings everyone fulfillment. And the pattern I keep seeing is that everyone has different things that when they're in that zone, nothing else matters to them. I was talking to my wrestling coach the other day and he was describing how like firefighting and you know being a wrestling coach and these things always kind of brought him away from the world around him, right? Like your stress is reduced and you feel like you're more at mental peace because you kind of give your mind a break from just thinking when you're there doing that activity. So would you say that working with the water or with these boats or on the Navy SEALs, that kind of fills that flow state activity for you, or
Absolutely. I will add one point. So I am ADHD dyslexic, without question. So everyone out there that has it, you're going to be just fine, regardless of what anyone else tells you. I'm pretty sure Steve Jobs was the exact same way. But the reason I say that is while the common thing is water, I can focus on something, whether it's wiring this or working on an engine for hours. But there comes a point where my mind's like squirrel, and I got to go do something else. So where a lot of people do one thing all the time, I like to do two or three things. It just as I'm doing one thing, my mind is processing what I was doing before and how I can improve or how I can develop capability. But you are 100% accurate. When you are in the zone, your flow state, there is nothing else. And what you described there is a SEAL mission. You have an end state, and while you're doing it, nothing else matters. I don't care how cold it is. I don't care how miserable it is. I don't care what the odds of success are. I will absolutely do it. So I have lived it for sure.
have you seen a pattern like with your other friends that you've worked with in this teals? Like I know that it won't necessarily be water for everyone, right? And I think there's more than Navy SEALs in just that piece of it because there's so much that goes into like working with the teams. Would you say you've found any like similar patterns in other people you work with in the past, or?
Yes, I have for sure. Um, but I'll tell you, outside of the brotherhood, the people that are most like you are going to be the ones that are going to be your friends. So the people I hang out with have the same type of drive, the same types of things that activate them. Whether one of them it does non for profit, which is pretty incredible. Another one, actually, several do non for profit. Another one, it's all about guns. I mean, the guy has more guns in his house than I think SEAL Team One Armory had, but there's guns everywhere. But yeah, you will absolutely find the same type of thing.
Cool. So going back to your life on the teams, I know that a lot of people always have questions like, what is it like to be on deployment? Like, what does it feel like? How do you deal with the stress of the day? So kind of walk me through, like, I know if you've probably been there for a while, it's probably been like different, like every deployment and different, like every time you're on some kind of mission. But can you like describe to me like what it feels like to be on deployment and like what the experience is kind of like?
Quite honestly, using your flow state as an example, for me it was easier. When you are here in the US and you're worried about, you know, filling the card, doing your bills, turning in paperwork, going to training, making sure your family is taken care of, calling your parents. When you deploy, it's a singular focus and you are laser focused for, 4 to 6 months, 10 months, a year and a half. For me, it was easy, but I caveat that with one thing. It cannot be done in isolation. I have an incredible wife that has spent here in January, it'll be 22 years supporting me. But I knew when I was forward that she had my back and I didn't have to worry about it. Um, and that she knew who and what I was and what it took to make me happy, and she supported it. There's that backside of things that you always have to be grounded to. For me, getting out, how would I describe it? When you get out of the military, it's kind of like a leaf falling on a river, and that river is kind of windy. The leaf falls and it starts drifting downriver, but you can see the tree that was the military, and you can see it for a while. But eventually that river is going to wind away, and the leaf will not see the military. Thus is your family. Thus is your grounding. At least it was for me. Is my family was my grounding that was on that leaf with me as we left the military, and they were there while I was in the military, always grounding my base.
Yeah, I think family is always important, even whether you're on the Navy SEALs or wherever you are. I think they are like the source of your sanity, even if we like don't realize it immediately, right? Like the fact that you have that kind of long-term relationship there, I think kind of brings us a sense of sanity as humans. And I see it like a lot of people, at least like younger people like around my age, like a lot of them when they talk about family, like it's something they'll do later on, like maybe they'll work for some time and they'll kind of push it back. And that's a big culture that I've seen in the modern day, like with pushing back of the families. And like I do want to have a family like early on, and I do value that a lot. But it's how would you say, like I know you've described it as like a really critical part of your life, but w w
So I'll start by saying that, I spent most of my formative life abroad, Italian father, South American mother. Family values were core to us, having dinner together, doing things together on Sunday. So I had that in me. When I was at Petty, was I thinking about family? No, I'm going to be completely honest. I didn't. When I started the Naval Academy, no. When I went to the SEALs, and I was a junior officer, it was all focused right here, right now. But there comes a point where maturity catches up and you open your eyes to the possibility of more than just what you're doing right there. And that's where family starts to creep in, and you realize how much you had that you haven't taken advantage of, and what you need to do moving forward, and that is, reestablishing relationships with sisters, with parents, with cousins, nieces, nephews. And those are the people that you carry with you forever, but you don't realize that until you're a little farther in life.
yeah. I think the same way. Like I always used to think that like, okay, family is important to me, but if I lost them, like would it bother me too much? As in like will I still be okay, right? Like will I still be able to like come over that and like still be able to move on and things like that? And I always thought that like since I was able to stay away from them at Petty, maybe I thought that I'd be okay. But now the more and more I think about it, like even if I'm not immediately thinking about them all the time, I think just having it as like the backbone of life gives us a sense of like mental peace, right? Which is like something I just thought about recently. But also like, going back to like your experiences like on the Navy SEAL, right? So you said that being on deployment wasn't that difficult because like you were kind of able to like laser focus on the thing. But what about like the physical discomfort piece of it? Like maybe more like the training for the buds and all that. Like I know like they try to push you to your edge in terms of the discomfort. So how would you say you've dealt with that piece?
So they do. They absolutely do. The closest thing they can replicate to the miseries of combat are physical exhaustion. And that's what they capitalize in through your training to see if when it really, really gets nasty, whether you can keep going. And what they're essentially doing is validating that you have what it takes to put mind over matter, that your body will do whatever your mind tells it to do, regardless of its discomfort. And we live that. And as a result, um, as you start finishing buds and you realize at that point, you recognize I am not a normal human being. I am not a normal human being. I'm wired differently. So does pain affect you differently. If you're trying to accomplish stuff, you can essentially ignore it. A lot of SEALs have, towards the end of their careers, a lot of issues that kind of pop up at once. physical issues. And that's only because they've reached the point where so much damage has accumulated that their muscles can't compensate for it anymore. But during the course of whatever you're doing, if it's hotter, okay, fine. If it's colder, okay, it's fine. If I'm losing sleep, okay, it's fine. If I'm doing things that no one else, that's fine. You're wired that way. We've been selected that way. And that's sort of what I was getting to when I was talking about my swimming at Petty. I did not have it here to get out of the comfort zone. What it takes to be a true, you know, Division 1A or world-class wrestler. Physicality is there, but there's something different here. And that is, I'm going to push harder. I don't care if I puke. I don't care if I hurt myself. I'm going to get better. I'm going to train more and do more. It's the exact same thing. Just again, I'm being very upfront. I did not have it till after the Naval Academy to really start going to the SEALs in dialing in. But you may very well have it right now because you're experiencing it in wrestling. You've got good guys and you've got great guys. Just try to characterize the difference. Well, look, both of them physical studs, both of them very confident. What is the difference? I mean, it's an interesting point.
Do you think everyone has the capacity to develop it, or do you think it's something that's innately like wired in us that like it's different?
No, I think it comes back to the core. Are you living or are you alive? If you're willing to step out and be like, hey, I'm living, I think it's very easy to bring that out. If you're alive and you're comfortable with 9 to 5, there might be those outliers that can experience it or develop it, but it's a different outlook on life from my perspective.
Yeah. And I do think that like, okay, let's say you've developed the skill to feel through your fears and take risks, for example, right? And you go and take the risks and you go and work hard. But there's certain limits that people have that when they reach that limit, they're like, this is too hard. Or they'll see like my body can't take it anymore. From that perspective, do you think everyone even like a mental state, can they develop a mental state to overcome like a very, very like valley of despair type of moment and overcome that? Or like what would you say for that?
In the same way that I can take someone that's 5'2" and make them a long distance runner, they can develop it, but it's never going to be the same as someone that's 6 foot. They can work as hard as they want and they can develop pieces of it, but there are people that are more naturally inclined. So yeah, I think everyone can develop it. It's whether they want to or not. It's kind of like I can lead a horse to water, but I can't make him drink. It's the same thing, exact same thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, in your time as a Navy SEAL, what do you think are some of like the biggest life lessons you've learned, right? I know that a lot of people listening, they might not necessarily like be on the path to becoming Navy SEALs, but I think there are definitely a lot of lessons we can extract that maybe can be applied universally to parts of life. So, what do you think are some of like the biggest life lessons you've learned as your time as a Navy
One,
SEAL?
you can't do it alone. You cannot do it alone. You might be able to do a lot of stuff, but it makes a team. It takes a team to achieve more. Team together, everyone achieves more. You have to have a core basis and a core basis in the things that you want to accomplish. And lastly, you have to be willing to get a little uncomfortable. Whether it's you're down to your last month's worth of pay or, your pick whatever it happens to be. You have to be willing to get out of the comfort zone. But and then the last piece for me has been my family core. Now, other people, I think they use their work as their family, and that might very well work. That's not me. I mean, I have, my workmates who are, in fact, I would call them extended family, but I have my core.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So, how long were you on the SEALs for, by the way? Like for your whole time period, or
26 years.
26 years? So I'm assuming it wasn't like always like an upward trend, or it wasn't always like everything's going great all the time. And there's probably moments where like it felt pretty low, right? Where you faced some like major challenge along the way, or there's some like major roadblock you faced. Can you think back to like a story or a time where maybe this description kind of fits, or some major
Um,
challenge you faced over the time?
you know, the misconception that everyone has about the SEALs is the movies where you're jumping out of planes and you're shooting and you're swimming and you're blowing stuff up and you're doing neat stuff. Those are the outliers when you have finished all the core pieces. What it takes to get there is far more miserable. The cold in training, the cold in your workup, the staying out long hours away from family. I mean, the ugly outweighs the great, but the great is the value is so much better than the misery that's what you look forward to. It's kind of like a banker going to work. Okay, he's going to work, but there are those times when he or she strikes a deal and they close, I don't know, a $20 million deal, and they're like, yeah, those are the outliers, but it takes everything to get to that point, you know? So much like you start your wrestling training and you start easy and it gets harder and harder and harder, and it ends going to, you know, the Blair Wrestling Championship, you know? It's the exact same thing.
Right. So, and these problems you face with like being away from family, right? Being away like from like people you love and things like that back at home. Would you say that pain, like you're able to deal with it better over time, or does it grow over time, or at first you're kind of fine, but then as you're away for so long, that's when it really starts to build, or?
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to the how long can you laser focus? That's why our deployments, depending on where you are, either 4 or 6 months for the most part, because you can focus on something for so long and you can work with teammates for only so long when you're together all the time. After that, you have to take a break. And they recognize that. You know, they absolutely recognize that. So that break, going back, resetting, restarting your training is utterly key. You know, your readiness, your muscles, they work in a sine wave. You know, you're not always going to be here. As you exert yourself, your muscles are going to start going down. And at a certain point, when you're on your way down, you need to stop so you can recover and they go back up. You know, that smooth sine wave, or, you know, motion of the ocean. It's the exact same thing with us.
So what do those break periods kind of look like? Like, do they offer like other things to keep you busy during that time, and they kind of just let you go for some time, or?
No, so on the SEALs, you know, following a standard 2-year workup cycle, at the end of your 2 years, you go back, you have leave and stand down, you know, which is a period of time, and then they reform new platoons because some guys go to this platoon, some guys go to the East Coast, other guys are going to the West Coast. They reconsolidate it and they start sending you to your basic training. Oh, look, we've got new guys. They need to go to these training. You guys need to go to advanced training. So you do your training pieces separately, and then you start coming together and you start reforming that team. Some guys might be the same, but for the most part, you're going to have you're going to have a lot of different people, and you have to build back to the same point where you were.
Mm-hmm. And also, like when you come out of the Naval Academy, right? Are you directly like applying? Like, are you directly going to the training just for Navy SEAL, or is there like some other like period in between, like we were part of maybe a different team, and then later
Yeah,
on you join?
that's a great question. So, you can go straight to the Navy SEALs out of the Naval Academy. I went to a ship, like I said, for a year and a half, and then I lateral transferred. So you're going to get all walks of life and all manner of education. We've had Air Force guys, Army guys, come into the community. You know, people straight out of high school and boot camp coming in, guys that have been in the field for, you know, 5, 6 years that decide that they want to do a little bit more. So it's a mix.
Did you say out of high school people come right to the teams?
Well, yeah, if they're, you know, a lot of guys, they will graduate, they'll go to boot camp, go to a ship or an airplane or you know, a fighter wing, and decide, no, that's not for me. And they'll apply for buds and get it. You know,
And
so you get some really young guys.
that's really cool. And like I've always like been confused about like how the different teams like kind of work in tandem. Like I know the Navy SEALs is kind of like their own deployment team and they kind of go on their own missions, but I'm assuming like in the Navy there's probably other like different teams and departments part of it. So how does those kind of like work together in the
Yeah.
organizational?
So it's important to note when you look at it, for every single operator, for every Tristan that is on the ground in combat, there's 7 to 8 people that it takes to get me to where I am, whether that's someone that's taking care of logistics and supply, someone that's taking care of pay, whether it's a pilot, a refueler, an intel person, a meteorologist. It takes everything to enable us. There is no SEAL capability without everybody. We happen to be one piece of the tool set, the sharp edge of the knife, but you still need the blade, you still need the tang, you still need the handle, you still need to make sure that sucker is polished and taken care of. It takes a lot of people. And I will tell you, if I have one frustration, it's that the news media portrays us as the end state. Look at what they did. No, it's not what we did or I did as a SEAL team, we as SEALs. It's what we did as a military, as a country, whether that's Army and Navy and Air Force and Marines supporting each other, or even Coast Guard. It takes all of those pieces to make it work. And then when you take it past that, it takes the country, it takes the people here with the desire, with the vision, with the understanding of what, the global geopolitical situation looks like and how it could affect us to make it happen. It really is a nation.
Yeah. When you mentioned like the media portrayal, it kind of reminded me that there's probably a lot of people in our society that have misconceptions about a lot of the aspects and pieces of being a Navy SEAL or being part of the Navy and what they actually do and consist of. So who do you look to as like maybe public figures that you think do a good job of kind of representing the teams, right? Like for example, I've watched podcasts by people like Jocko Willink. I've read books, people like Life Babin, for example. Do you think they do a good job of kind of being an accurate representation of what it really means in the Navy SEALs, or where would you look for like kind of for that kind of people?
So I have never been one of those SEALs that sought the media. There's nothing wrong with that. That's
Right.
just never been me. I've been more on the quiet side. The guys for me that I follow are the ones that you would never know because they're doing non-for-profit. They're raising money for the guys that got their arms blown off or have traumatic brain injuries or lost their child. It's the backside, the quiet side, the people putting together the trips to oxygen chambers to, help the, tissue regeneration, or teaching the husband and wife and their kids to start interacting again. Because a lot of people, they are built slightly different than I am. And when they come back, it is a complete shift up here from combat to living with family. So while Jocko and I, we were at SEAL Team 1 together, and all those guys I know very well, and they're absolutely fantastic guys. I've just never been that I need to follow people to validate what they are or they aren't doing. I've got guys that were with me in Afghanistan that are building houses for homeless, like Habitat for Humanity kind of stuff. That's that's pretty cool. It's not one of those things that comes with, a media sponsorship, but it doesn't make it any less important.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone has their own way of kind of like working on their own projects and doing their own things afterwards. So it's amazing that like a lot of the Navy SEALs come out and they work on these other projects like the non-profits you talk about. So that's
It's
cool.
funny. I will absolutely tell you that Navy SEALs are known for writing books or going to movies. So whenever I go somewhere, they're like, Tristan, are you a book guy or are you a movie guy? So that aspect of it is true. And the other services joke with us about it.
Yeah. So I know you showed me the boats before, but I think it'd be cool if you could show the people on the podcast some of the boats you have around
Sure.
you in the room.
All right. So this boat right here is the 2008 European World Champion. This is the ex-Ukrainian race boat named, ready for this? The Seagull, because seagulls are really fast and scary. Um, This is the Twisted Metal race boat right here. This boat and his owner, Billy, absolutely incredible people. And Mike, for that matter, who own the shop I'm sitting in, they run this boat, and this is multinational and world championship boat. And then we have, well, outside of all the drag cars and boat pieces and stuff, we also have this iconic creature right here. That is the Popeyes Al Copeland 1983 race boat, completely original.
Wow, that's cool. So how does like the whole boat racing like thing work? Like, are there organized tournaments nationwide, or like what are these like boats kind of compete in, and who
Yeah. So
participates in those?
if you can see it if you go to like the Offshore Powerboat Association, the OPA. There are different classes, much like there are different classes, Indy. You got your Indy Lights, you got your Formula Ones, you've got your GP cars, you've got your prototype cars. The boat racing is the same. Like, this is an open canopy boat, so you're not going to take it to ludicrous speeds. Is it capable of it? Sure. But, that boat right there has a closed canopy on it. So if you happen to flip it, you're a lot more protected. And that boat also has onboard oxygen systems. So it all depends on the class. Now, the powers can be very similar. So can this boat go as fast as that one? Probably pretty darn close, but I'm not sure I would want to be in that boat on 150,
And you participated in some of these races, right? Or
Well, I actually hoping to starting this summer, but I've
oh,
been
that's
to.
cool.
Yep.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming down. It's been an amazing discussion. Do you have any final thoughts you want to end with, or?
The only thing I will tell everyone is truly, you can accomplish whatever you set your mind to. And given the age that most of, I'm guessing your audience is at Petty, you don't have to know what that is yet. You just need to be open to the future, and make it the best that you possibly can, putting no limitations on yourself.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming down. I really enjoyed this
My
discussion today.
pleasure.
All right, have a good
Cheers.
one.